All right, guys, we're gonna get started on our building our coil pot. So the first thing that we need for this is our template. We're starting this project by making a template that is the profile of our pot. And this is gonna be our guide through the making process. So we need to have that before we start. Once we have this made, we can start building. So the things that we need to get started are your board. We're gonna build this on the board. So our pot's actually gonna stick to it for a little bit, and we'll cut it off and release it later. But it'll help us during the build if it's kind of stuck to it as opposed to kind of moving around or picking it up and all kinds of things. So our board, we're gonna build this whole thing using a banding wheel, and I'll talk about that as we go. But we need a banding wheel to build this, and then just some clay. So to get started, first thing is building the bottom of this pot. So we could use the slab roller and roll out a slab, but just to try a different method than that, I'm gonna take a ball of clay. So I'm beating this around into a ball, and then I'm gonna flatten this by hand. The thickest spot here is in the middle of this, okay? So I'm gonna flatten this by throwing it back and forth in my hands. I'm hitting this with the backside of my knuckles right here. So I'm hitting it right in the middle of or on the top of my palm. I'm hitting it right there as I throw this back and forth. I'm hitting that part of my hand right in the middle of this ball of clay. Boom, right there, the thickest spot. Also, as I do this, I'm rotating my hands. So my top hand is going around as I do that, and my bottom hand's going reverse as I do that. So I'm throwing this back and forth. I'm rotating in different directions, and I'm hitting it in the middle here, the thickest spot. So I'm expanding it from the middle out. So I'm expanding it from the thickest point. By rotating this and keeping it in the round, it's gonna expand more evenly than if I just kind of do it without structure. It'll be kind of wild, a kind of an amorphous blob this isn't totally even, but it would be even more uneven if I didn't do this with something of a system. So I'm thinning this out, but right now I want to leave it a little bit thicker. In the end, we're always shooting for pinky finger thickness. It's a little bit thicker than that, but we're about there. So I'm gonna stop flattening it by hand, and I'm gonna put it on my board right in the middle there. And then I'm gonna grab a chunk of clay and just roll this into a piece, rip that in half, rip that half in half, and I'm gonna put some chunks on the outside edges of the banding wheel, like this. So 4 pieces there. This will help my board. Right now, my loose board will just kind of roll around as I go. But if I have some chunks up here, like this, I can put this on there, some wadding, put some wadding down, and press that into place, and then it holds it pretty steady. So that's a nice way to do that. Okay, so I got this on my board. It's all set, ready to go. So I'm gonna just kind of thin this out a little bit more before I smooth it and compress this. So I'm just gonna start on the banding wheel. I'm gonna keep my hand right here in the middle and start hammering down in a rhythm. And then I'm slowly gonna start spiraling out as I do this. So as I'm rotating the wheel, I'm slowly moving my arm out. I'm swinging my arm out. And so I'm kind of chasing off any of the major unevennesses. This isn't so bad, but if there's any like real thick spots, we can kind of spiral out and push that stuff to the outside. I'm also really hammering this down onto the wood here to get it to stick to it. That looks pretty good to me. And then the last thing I'll do in prepping the bottom is just kind of go around with a rib tool, a smooth rib. Again, like we said, with every project, there's going to be elements of compression, and that's to compact the surfaces so that the clay particles are strong. So whenever we're smoothing, especially in the beginning, if you're doing an initial smoothing, it's more compacting than smoothing, just for the strength of the pot and the clay prep. So I got that pretty smooth there. Looks good. Okay, so we got this prepped. The last thing that we need to do is cut out like a nice shape here, a nice probably circular shape. So I'm gonna start looking at my template here. The middle of this is right about here. So I wanna gauge where my circle is based on my template. So in looking at this, I wanna look at the areas, this template has undulations to it, which is what we're looking for with this project. We wanna have some shape change. So I wanna look at the areas that are the most in and base my width off of that, okay? So this area is most in down at the bottom. So if I make this base super small like this, the middle is my halfway point. So the other, if that's right here, then it's gonna expand over to here. That's a really narrow bottom, which is okay, but it could be challenging to build this wide belly later. So it might be more stable if I move that out a little bit. Okay, and give that narrow spot down here a little bit of width, which will help me like structurally build this piece. Okay, so those are the things that I'm thinking about as I do this. So I like to start by just spinning this and just coming in with a knife or a needle tool or a pen or your fingernail, whatever, and just make a wide circle. So I can see, but with that wide circle, this is the innermost area, so that's gonna come over here. That's a really wide piece there. So I'm gonna go a little bit smaller with that. Make a new circle. That's there. Maybe I'll go a little hair smaller than that. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks good right there. So now I can cut that out. It's not too big. It's not too small. You can, of course, go too big. I love that. Go huge, you know, push the limits. But I just wouldn't, going too small can be more challenging, in my opinion. Okay, so now we got our base ready. Now we're ready to start making some coils and getting this pot made. All right, so we're gonna make some coils here. I think I like the build. We're just gonna be roughing this pot out right now. We wanna get it generally built to the profile of the pot. Then we'll go back and clean it up and smooth it out really well. So I don't wanna spend forever building this thing. We wanna get it built well in, you know, a couple days-ish, you know, depending on time. Maybe up to a week in the general construction of a coil pot, but hopefully not quite that long. I know this is your first, if this is your first coil pot. So, you know, we don't want to take forever doing this. So for building coils, that shouldn't take 5 minutes to make a coil. You know, it should be kind of fast. I barely roll coils out, or I don't at all. So how I start making coils is just taking a chunk of clay and just kind of squeezing it and rolling it around in my hands like this. So I just get it started super fast. You know, that was like 5 to 10 seconds there. If I do roll it at all, it's kind of just to smooth it out a little bit. And I'm just I have a pretty light touch to it. What we're looking for with a coil is that to be kind of basically uniform. So it doesn't have like big fat spots and then get thin and it's all kind of unruly. We want to have some kind of, you know, parallel sides. We want it to have, be a nice thing so it's manageable. Okay, so let's get this coil on here. This first coil, I like to definitely score that pretty well and make sure that it's on the edge of this, or it's attached to the base really well. So I'm definitely gonna score the heck out of this. In the past, I've seen this is a bit of a problem area where these become detached if people don't score these. And generally you should score everything, like we've said, but there's loopholes, which I'll show you a couple right now. But this first one for sure, we wanna score that and get that on really well. So for putting coils together, there's 3 steps as I teach it. So get your coil attached, blend the seams, and then thin it out. So each time you put a coil on, you do those 3 steps. So I'm gonna start by getting this attached, step 1. I'm gonna start from one end, and I'm gonna get this attached. So I'm gonna take my fingers on the sides like this. I'm on the banding wheel here, and I'm pushing down. So I'm getting this attached. So I'm just going around. As I do this, notice my hand stays in the same spot. This is why we use a banding wheel. Do the same mechanical movements as we go. You can see the rhythm, the patterning that's happening there, the textures of my fingers. That's from staying in the same place. I can apply the same pressure, the same angles as I put that on, okay? So I got that attached, that's step 1. Step 2, blend the seams. So you can see the seam on the inside here as well as the outside. So we want those to disappear. So I'm just gonna take my finger and just smear that coil in until it's gone. I kind of blend that in a little bit too. Okay, so there's the inside, the seam is gone. Now I'm gonna smear this seam on the outside, especially this first one. I often kind of smear it until it's just almost welded to the board. Just smear it right on down there. Just make sure it's really stuck on there. I think it makes it easier for this build. Okay, so that's attached. So that's step 2. Step 2 is blending the seams. So we got it attached, we blended the seams. Now we want to do step 3. So we need our template for this. Okay, so we're going to use this profile template to get us started. So we need to thin these walls out, but when we do that, we also need to direct the clay. So the bottom of my template here, you can see it goes in a little bit. If you look at this, it's almost coming out a little bit on the side here. Right, that angle, it's got a little bit of a outward turn to it. So what we need to understand with clay is right here with this little ball of clay. When I squeeze this, which way does the clay go? Which way does the clay expand? The answer is it expands out in every direction. Super, super important to know. The clay expands out in every direction. So if left undirected, this clay will just expand. If I go around this coil to thin it out and I just squeeze it, it's going to go out, because that's just what you're doing to it. So you cannot simply just squeeze the clay. We need to squeeze it. We need to squeeze it and direct it at the same time. So right now, my template's telling me this needs to come in. It needs to go in like this on an angle. So when I squeeze this, I'm also going to, in the same motion, bring my fingers together as I do that. Okay? So what that looks like is this. So I'm pushing that clay in. So let's check. Boom. See that right there? It kind of comes away over here, so I went a little bit too much, but it's easier to pull the clay out than if it's expanded out too much. Then we might have to do something drastic or even have a little surgery on your pot, or in some extreme cases, start over. which nobody wants to do that. So that tells me I'm on the right path. So now I can kind of go around. Again, this is why we use the banding wheel. So my hands are staying in this same position as I go around. So I'm squeezing the clay in, I'm pushing my thumbs together. You can see it's wrinkling as I'm doing that because I'm really pushing this clay together as I'm getting that to go up. So if I just squeezed this, it would go out. Okay, so let's look at this bottom section right down here. It's good. It's a little too much over here, so I'm kind of pulling that top part out. So checking as I build. Okay, so that's coil one. That's one coil right there. Okay, so coil two, it's gonna be a little bit different as we go. Okay, so I'm gonna make this real fast, squeeze it. I guess I'll roll it out again just to smooth it. And then we're ready to go. So you don't have to score every coil as you go. It's probably a good idea to. You can certainly do that, and that's our general rule. But if the clays are the same consistency, this is all really wet clay, you can get away with not scoring every coil as you go, but you certainly have to do each of these steps. So get the coil attached, blend the seams, and then thin it out. So I can get away with not scoring right now because this is all really wet clay, and the clays match. They're wet and they match. If I come in tomorrow and I continue building, the clays will not match. That first coil will not match yesterday's clay. So I certainly want to score that first coil that I put on and then get that connected really well, and then I could continue building and not scoring. But the clay bodies have to match for sure, the consistencies of the clay. And that is wet. It should be wet clay if you're getting away with this. Okay, so it's gonna be a little bit different here, this next coil and the rest of the coils. When I put this next coil on, I wanna get it attached. So I'm going to smear this coil over the coil underneath it. So you can see that here. I'm smearing this down under it, okay? When I do that, I'm supporting the back side. If this hand wasn't here, I would blow that wall out or smash it all down as I do it. But by creating a flat surface on the back side as I do this, it's remaining pretty stable here as I go. I'm not blowing it out or having a massive blowout anyways. So I did that, and notice again, the banding wheel, my pressure stayed the same as I did that. Boom, 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 boom. This hand is not moving. I'm not kind of doing these things all around, different hand grips. I'm doing the same grip. So now I'm gonna blend the seam, or I'm gonna get this attached. So I'm gonna finish on the outside. So this is kind of a twofer. I'm kind of blending the seam, getting it attached on the outside. Again, my hand is staying stationary, staying right in this one position that I started with. I'm gonna go around the inside, supporting it here. I'm just smearing this a little bit more so that that seam disappears on the inside. Okay, so that looks clean. It's all blended inside there, okay? So I got it attached, I blended the seams, and now we can thin this out. So on this coil, this wants to now come out. So I can just squeeze it. So when I do that, when I squeeze this, I want it to come out. So I'm gonna kind of get my fingers low under where I just attached it, and I'm gonna work this thick coil up. So I'm gonna kind of pinch this. I'm kind of pulling this up, doing a couple pinches per section, and leaning back on it a little bit. Let's check that. Oh yeah, that's spot on. Spot on. Okay. So I can kind of go around. I'm just kind of leaning back on it. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna do one last thing. I'm gonna keep building, probably easily get in one of our class periods, 2 to 4 coils on per class would be outstanding. So this was 2 coils, at least a fourth the way up. I'm a little, a fourth the way up. So that's great. 4 days I got my pot built. Just taking it slow, doing that. If I want to get a third coil on today, this clay is really soft. So if I want to put another coil on this, it's going to become more challenging the bigger this gets with soft clay. So we probably want to be working with the torch on this. So this torch, the flame path is very directional. There's a lot of pressure coming out of here, so it pushes the heat forward a whole lot. So if I have the torch on, my hand is an inch from that flame and it's just warm, But if my hand was 8 inches away right here, and I turn this on, I would severely burn my hand because it's so forcefully directional. So if I'm gonna heat up the outside of this pot, if I aim this down to firm this up, I'm gonna certainly burn the wood, right? Which we can't do that. But if I turn this upside down, I can get very close to the wood, but the direction is pushing up and off away from the pot. So by coming under it like this, the bottom of this, the neck of this is hitting the board. I'm very close to it. I'm watching. I don't want to hit that board, but I can get very close to it without hitting it. You can do it a lot more easily on the inside because we're just aiming down into clay, which is fine to do. But one of the things I try to avoid when doing this, besides wood, is the rim. So when I'm heating this up, I'm coming low and I'm trying to firm up this area of the pot, but not the rim itself. So when I come on the inside, I'm just below the rim and I'm heating up the sidewalls on the interior, but I don't want to heat up this rim because we want this to remain, the rim, like right on the edge there, we want that to remain as soft as possible for our next coil that we're putting on there. Okay, so hopefully that helps you get started and coil on, and make a juicy coil pot, and coil on, my brothers, and here we go. So yeah, here we go. Let's do this.